Hi, everyone. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance, and this is Spotlight Now. Today, I'm sitting here with Kelly Anderson, who is the Vice President of Legacy of Love Funeral Planning. Kelly leads efforts to help families navigate the emotional and financial aspects of funeral pre-planning. With a background in marketing, insurance, and financial services, she brings a strategic and compassionate approach to end-of-life planning. Kelly is passionate about empowering families to make informed decisions that provide peace of mind and lasting security, including environmentally conscious options like green burials. So, welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Ed. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. And, this is a really important conversation, not only for the provider and the consumer. So, why don't we get started by learning a little bit about what got you involved in the funeral industry?
Yeah, so I always tell people it seems like you either are born into the industry or the industry finds you, right? So I didn't go out kind of thinking that this is the kind of industry that I'd end up working in, but it kind of fell onto me. I've worked in a marketing background a lot in my early career, and then I've also began working in insurance. So life insurance, health insurance, retirement planning, and our agency actually started working with this funeral pre-planning solution for families. And we thought it was so great to kind of provide emotional protection, not just like quote unquote life insurance or death benefit. There's so much more that goes into that time for a family than just money. So making these arrangements ahead of time was really wonderful to work with those families and help them with that process, because it is overwhelming and it can be uncomfortable to think about at times. So to be able to support them in that was really great. So the company was previously founded by a different gentleman who we purchased the company from. He left due to some personal reasons, and we were able to kind of further the mission that he started. And it's been a great process since. I've loved getting to help families as well as help our partners with reaching families.
That's exactly right. And you've said something that resonates with me. Either you're born into it or it finds you. So when you find that passion for helping people, it's really vitally important. And the consumers on this, our viewers need to know that the services that you provide, are really important, because you don't want to leave these decisions for others to make for you. Ultimately, you'll get what you want if you take care of it while you're living, and then you're caring for your loved ones, at the time of need, so they don't have to think of these things. And with that being said, I think a lot of people would probably say, so, where do I begin? So, if you could tell us a little bit about your planning process and what steps can a family expect to take.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're a little bit different than some of the other, pre-planning options out there because we're not necessarily specific to one funeral home. Our organization is not a funeral home. So most people, when they think of pre-planning, they think of going to that local funeral director and sitting down with them and pre-arranging for that specific funeral home, which is still a great option. But we found that a lot of families' lives and wishes kind of look different with the increase in options such as green burial or different types of services that maybe are a little bit less traditional. We have really been able to help families with kind of creating whatever that they want that day to look like for their loved ones and to help that grieving process. So not only are we a little bit more innovative in our offerings than maybe just a local funeral home, we also are basically national. So we can work in pretty much any state across the country to help families. We have in-person agents that they can meet with, or they can talk to somebody over like a Zoom call like today. And we basically walk the client through all the different decisions that have to be made regarding a funeral arrangement. So we go over a lot of the traditional options, like if they want a burial or a cremation, do they want to have a service and a viewing, all the different cash advance items that might need to be considered. We check in if they have a cemetery already or not, and we encourage them to make arrangements if they know where they want to go for that cemetery. So it's really what I find is families, they're going through this process with one of our counselors and they go, I had no idea there was this many decisions, to be made. And wow, I can only imagine what my daughter or my spouse would have had to go through if they were grieving a loss so deep and having to make all these decisions when it's hard enough for me today. So that's really, I think, as we go through the process, families start to realize what a gift it is to make those decisions to ahead of time for their loved ones. And then on the flip side, when that time comes for the family, uh, we actually have a leather-like binder. It's a Legacy of Love funeral planning binder, and it says "My Final Wishes" on the spine. So every person that does a plan with us receives this, as well as an online portal that they can share their funeral plan with their loved ones, so that when the time comes, they know exactly who to call, how to access the funeral plan information. We're also available to support them with that process. We get, at need calls with families wondering, how do I submit the claim for this policy, or how do I, handle everything, and we support them through that process. So that's kind of a little overview of what we do for families and kind of how the process works.
Absolutely. And you touched on some things here that I say all the time to my consumer, and I think it's important that I clarify and back you up on it, that a lot of times people will say, well, what happens if the funeral home goes out of business? Or what happens if they're, or if I find out something or I don't like them, or and as you mentioned, it doesn't have to go directly through a specific funeral home. You can always switch if you need to. If you move to a different state, these types of things always arise, and it's easily overcome because of the way the system is designed. So I'm glad that you said that. And I guess you kind of touched on what makes it important. But what should viewers know when it comes to the significance of making advanced arrangements? I guess even, kind of financially and spiritually, what would you say to the consumers is most important about that?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of different aspects to pre-arranging and the benefits and why it's important. And I think the first one is it allows you to honor your own wishes. So some people have fairly strong, maybe it's spiritual beliefs, or they really want to do a burial. They just have different wishes. And so by making those arrangements ahead of time, you ensure that those wishes will be honored. On the financial side, you can have guaranteed pricing with certain providers. You can beat inflation, right? So costs are going to increase for funeral services and, items as time goes on. So by starting now, you can actually kind of curve some of those inflation costs just by locking in prices. Um, and then for your family, it really does help them to know that they're honoring your wishes. I think that there's a lot of peace that comes with that, to know that their final arrangements are what you wanted. They don't have to second guess. And then additionally, families can argue over arrangements. And I hate to say that, but we all probably know someone, or maybe it's been in your own family where that's occurred. So a lot of our clients, they're saying, like, I'm so glad that I'm making arrangements because I don't even talk to my brother anymore after mom's funeral, because it was just two different ideas, or someone doesn't want to pay for it. We see all the time GoFundMe's, fish fries, whatever, to be able to cover funeral costs. So by pre-arranging, you're able to relieve that burden financially off of your family as well. Um, so I think those are kind of the main things that most people consider, especially when it comes to green burial. If your family's not familiar with that as even being an option, or your local funeral home provider may or may not offer that as an option, it's good to kind of have those wishes defined up front, so that way your family can honor what you would want.
No, absolutely. And you know what? The sure way to get what you want in death, and I hate to say this, but it's true, is to be sure that it's paid for. Because when people have opinions in this, that sometimes is what muddies the water, where you might not get what you want because one individual doesn't want you to have it, or they want something different. And what's funny is I've had the instances where I've had 10 people say that's what mom wanted. And there was one that said, but that's not what I want. And nobody wants to fight. So they end up going, the direction of the one. So I think that that's really important to be known. And, I know the answer to this question, but it's probably best for you to address it. So a lot of people who are maybe unfamiliar with eco-friendly funeral options, meaning they know what they are, but because they're a little different than the traditional funeral, they don't know what, if the same rules apply, let's say. So obviously I know that you do accommodate eco-friendly funeral options. So do you see a link between green funerals and advanced planning? And I think you touched on it a little bit, but But we have things like natural burial, tree of life, aquamation, natural organic reduction. Uh, do all those fit into the services you provide?
Yes, all of our plans can be completely customizable. I mean, I know there's ways that companies that you can fly your ashes to space, not saying that's green, but there's lots of different things that you can do when it comes to your, final arrangements. But we do offer all of what you mentioned, the coral reef, barrier reef options and tree of life, where you can do that. So everything is completely customizable. And I know our team is really passionate about providing more education as we've grown more in this space to families. So we're going to also be creating like a green burial resource page on our site because we've found that when people are presented the option, they're more interested in it than you might not just because they never knew about it. So we're finding that, providing those resources and options for families has kind of made them more intrigued by it. And not every provider, funeral home is maybe offering that yet. It is still kind of on the forefront, I guess you could say. So being able to work with a company like us, you're able to see kind of all the options out there, not be limited by what's directly in your, maybe town. But yeah, I love one of our partners that we've worked with. She said, green barrel is nothing new. It's something we've been doing for hundreds of years. It's kind of, we went away from that and now we're coming back. And I think that that mentality is really helpful with families when we're talking about green burial and eco-friendly options, as well as like the beauty of, yes, we're laying someone to rest, but new things will come from this. I think that's a really beautiful picture that a lot of families are seeing now with green burial.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And yeah, we've been doing it since the dawn of time. We've just lost touch with it. You're absolutely correct. I mean, we're taking the most ancient practice and putting it back into action. So, with all that being said, do you foresee an increase in families utilizing funeral planning services in the future?
I think so. I think that there's going to be more awareness about it. I think also families are not always staying local like they used to be, right? People are moving across the country, even or across the world, and families are not all local. So having these decisions pre-planned and decided upon really brings peace of mind, and being able to have a portable option is really important. I think that we've seen an increase, and I'm sure that more families will as well as they kind of go through that process with someone who has prearranged. It makes them more likely to prearrange too.
Yes, I agree with that. And folks, I speak to my customers all the time about the merits of prearrangement. And to speak to an outside company in the sense, not meaning that you don't go through your local funeral home. Certainly, you would talk to Kelly and you could deal with your local funeral home. That would not be an issue. Uh, you know, think about what we've talked about today. It's really important. It's not only important for yourself, but it's important for your family. Make the arrangements today at today's prices. I mean, if we're talking about economics, that's a big part of what we do. I tell my families that when you, for instance, purchase a burial plot today and you have the good fortune of hopefully living another 50 years, well, then you've really made a very wise choice. So thanks for joining us, Kelly. Viewers, you can learn more by visiting legacyoflove.com. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it as well.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Ed Bixby from the Global Green Burial Alliance, and see you at the next spotlight.